Today's topic is about using a editor, Vim, and I will start out with a bit of history, but in general, this is a difficult topic. So we discussed if this makes sense, because just in a single talk, Vim is a very complicated tool. You only can scratch at the surface, and so this is the first time I give this talk, and I hope it is useful to you, and I would ask for your feedback then afterwards. So because I'm not sure if this really works out, but we will see. Okay, so as always, if you listened to one of my talks before, I'm a great fan of historic background or just where things come from, especially for computer science. And so also, I cannot spare you from some history. So where it all started is the line editor. This was created by Ken Thompson, so one of the old ones in the Unix environment in 1969. So at the very beginning of the Unix development. And I mean, clearly, when you want to create an operating system, you need an editor. So apart from an assembler or a compiler, you need an editor. As you can see in the image here on the right-hand side, computers at that time, not necessarily or didn't have a screen. So the interface to the computer to get an answer was the teleprompter. So it printed out lines. And you can imagine that to create an editor for such a hostile, not user-friendly environment is a difficult task. Someone quoted that Ed is possibly the most user-hostile editor ever created. I didn't use it, but interestingly, it's still around. So when you are on Mac OS or on Linux, Ed is there. Yeah, so you can try it and torture yourself. In 1976, Bill Joy, some of you may know him. He is a co-founder of Sun Microsystems, and he was for a lot of years the CTO at Sun Microsystems, created the X line editor. This was at UC Berkeley, and well, he tried to make it more user-friendly. And at this point, he also created a new mode, a so-called visual mode. And so in the beginning, VI was just a different mode in X. Just later, I think in 1979, this special mode was offered as a separate command, so the VI command, which then took you straight into this visual mode. The X mode is still around. So VI and of course also Vim have this X mode still there. And of course, also the X line editor is still available on all the Unix clones still today. In 1991, Bram Mollenaar came up with a version of Vim. He called it Vim VI Improved. It wasn't called Improved in the beginning, but later on they changed it to Improved. This was based on Stevie. That was an ST editor, stands for ST editor for VI enthusiast, and it was created in 1987 for the Atari ST. And also Bram Mollenaar in the beginning developed it on Amiga. And over the years, Vim turned out, or is now, by far the most popular VI clone. And of course, it can still be used as the original Vim, as the original VI, but it superseded it in a lot of ways. So he added a lot of functionality. And when people nowadays talk about VI, they mostly talk about the functionality and the options you have with Vim. By the way, don't hesitate to interrupt me or ask questions in between, it's no problem. So I already said that it was kind of difficult to do this talk because, well, an editor, you should try out things. And the question is, what's the aim of this talk? So therefore, I created a slide what this talk is not about. So this is no introduction to Vim. If you don't know Vim, you will be as clueless as before. Yeah. So of course I will tell you some commands, but this is not a complete introduction what Vim is all about. Not for beginners and also not for advanced users. And I also will have no exhaustive list of commands. Of course, I have examples, but they are only to give you starting points and to illustrate what this is about, what I think why Vim is such a great tool, especially for programming, but for all kinds of text editing. What I want to achieve is I want to introduce you to the mindset and the habits that make Vim a powerful tool. It's not a very user-friendly tool, but it really pays out to invest some effort into this. This is also not an editor for everybody. Yeah, so you must have a certain mindset and a certain way how you use your environment to make this really useful. Yeah. And at the end, I also want to say, of course, you may use other editors, and other editors can be just as good as Vim. Yeah? So just try it out. So this is a comic from the Vim website. And as you might know, there is this eternal battle. Computer scientists kind of tend to have religious wars about things. And one of those wars is between Emacs and Vim. And here you see, well, the penguin says, once an editor and says, Emacs, wow, that's too heavy. By the way, I also started out with Emacs at some point. Then he offered him Vim. It's too weird. There are too many things to do and adapt. And then he gets, well, something really simple that is really bad, Notepad+. Yeah. And what I tried is, when you attended last talks, they were pretty long. I hope that we will get this done in under 1 hour. Yeah? So I didn't give it, but I hope we will get it under 1 hour. Some resources, just to give you starting points for if you are already a Vim user, you may already know some of those websites. So Vim has a lot of functionality built in, but the real power comes into by extending it with plugins. And Vim Awesome is a repository for Vim plugins. So it gives you very powerful search facilities, you see rankings and so on. So it's just to search through plugins. If you search, for example, for a certain language plugin, this is a good way to start and to find out what other people are using. Then Vimcasts is a website with screencasts about Vim. So if you want to learn, I'm not so much the video guy, yeah, but a lot of people like videos. So this is probably then the right site for you. Next is Vim Colors. As we all know, things need to look nice, yeah. And so color schemes is important. By the way, color scheme is also important for functionality, that you get a quick feedback if something is wrong, if the syntax is wrong. And so this is similar to Vim Awesome, but just for color schemes for Vim. And finally, there is a Vim tips repository. This was previously on the official Vim site. Of course, there's also a Vim website, but I think for most users, this is not very interesting, the original or the official website. And the Vim tips wiki was moved to here. And finally, one nice article by the master himself, so by Bram Molenaar, is a Dutchman, 7 Habits of Effective Text Editing. You might know there is this 7 Habits of Effective People or something it is called. And this is, I think, a very nice article about how you should use Vim to make the most of it. Now it starts where we can discuss if this makes sense, but in my opinion, Vim is only useful if you make it your tool. Yeah, so if you adapt it to your needs, to your environment, to your preferences, and to your requirements. And therefore, I think that, of course, you can use it vanilla without configuring it at all, but you will leave away a lot of stuff that makes this a great tool. And so I just want to introduce some, for me, essential plugins which I think everybody should at least try once, and then make your own decision if this is useful to you. So first of all, when you start out with plugins, I suggest use in any case a plugin manager. The problem with those plugins is you also in previous years. So when I started with Vim for a very long time, when GitHub was not around yet, those were simple tarballs, and you untarred it, and well, it was really messed up to update the things, to erase plugins. Nowadays, there are plugin managers, and I use Vimplug. There are others. I guess they all work. And what this thing does is it allows you to, in a very simple way, to install plugins, to update them, and to remove them. And this is really an essential thing, because it enables you to try out things and without messing up your environment. Then the next thing I want to introduce to you is FZF. So that's a command line fuzzy finder. Maybe you already have heard of it. Its usage is not restricted to Vim, but for me, this is a very central part of my tool set in Vim. So of course, you need FZF somewhere installed. There are packages for all operating systems. I use Homebrew on Mac, for example. Essentially, this is just a user interface. It gets a list of strings, and then it allows you to fuzzy search in this list of strings and select something out of it. There is a Vim plugin that integrates FZF and so fuzzy find, and also already offers all commands that you want to use. Of course, you can configure it, but it really is very useful out of the box. Next, and this is I use this together with this fuzzy find plugin, is a fast recursive regular expression grab tool. I started out with ACK, this is a Perl script, but nowadays there are other implementations. What I currently use is ripgrab. So this is not Golang, but Rust. It's implemented in Rust. It's blindingly fast. And you can have 10,000s of files. It's incredibly fast. And this is a very useful tool, especially if you have a code that you do not know, or if you want to learn about how things work in a project. Is a very important tool that you have a recursive regular express or a grab tool, a global grab tool. And last but not least, there is FD. That's also implemented in Rust, a find alternative. And this is actually to speed up FZF, because in standard mode in FZF, it gets a list of files. And this means you need to come up very quickly with this list of files. And the standard find, when you have really a large project, let's say 10,000s of files, it takes a while. And while you already can search in this not yet finished list, this FD thing is really a huge improvement, because it gets through 10,000s of files in a fraction of seconds. Then what I use a lot and what I recommend to any programmer is completion. Vim has completion built in, so you don't need anything extra for that. But I have a plugin installed, Vim New Complete, that allows you to configure the built-in Vim completion, so in which order you use it, and you can access all completion with just tab. And there are people who like auto-completion, so that the completion is enabled while you type. I don't like that, because I think it gets into my way. It's too heavyweight for me. I like to explicitly request it with tab. But especially when you are a programmer, you really shouldn't miss out on that. Completion saves you from errors. It saves you from typing. It's a very important feature. Of course, this is nothing specific to Vim. Any large editor has support for completion. Next, what I recommend is a language server protocol enabled linter. So what is this about? Any modern language, LLVM, Golang, and so on, they have a so-called language server. This is a a program interface where the editor contacts this and can do, for example, syntax checks while you edit. It can access all information the compiler has about the code, for example, searching for symbols, doing refactoring, and so on. I use it especially for languages that are probably not compiled, to get an instant feedback about when there is an error. Because when you make an error, especially when programming, you really want to get feedback very quickly. Best while you are typing, that you can at once fix it. And such a linter enables this for you. And then the error is marked and you can decide what you want to do on it. You will see in the demo how this works. Out of the box, Vim is configured, let's say, suboptimal. So I don't know why, but the default configuration usually really leaves out a lot of things anybody wants. And of course, you can search for other configurations, but if you don't want to spend time fiddling, there is a plugin from Tim Pope, Vim Sensible, and he calls this defaults everyone can agree on. And so this is something I recommend if you really want to quickly get a good default setting and don't want to spend too much time in configuration. When you want to ask for my current configuration, of course, this is ongoing, but I don't change too much there recently. Here is a QR code where you can download my Vim RC. It's of course a very personal thing, but still, maybe it's useful to you. I think it has a lot of things that are common ground, And I will do the demo with my configuration. I will explain in a moment why. So you may want to have a look if you find some of the features there interesting. Some honorable mentions for plugins. There is Vim Easy Motion. I will also use it in the demo, especially for beginners. Moving in a text with Vim can be cumbersome because at the beginning there are so many shortcuts, so many commands, and especially beginners will only navigate with the arrow keys. And this is really a bad idea, because if you just use the arrow keys, Vim is just a terrible editor. And Vim Easy Motion makes movements, random movements in the visible part of the screen just easier. You will also see in the demo. Then Auto Pairs is a nice plugin that eases the editing of pairwise things like brackets, quotation marks, and stuff like that. And Vim unimpaired is to change enclosing brackets, braces, tags, and so on. So now, the basics. When you look at the documentation, or if you have a book or anything, you will see that Vim has hundreds, thousands of commands and options. And all of those commands then can be combined with each other in a powerful way. So, and of course, it's not possible to learn, and it also doesn't make any sense to learn all those commands. So what you do is you should learn, and this is a process. You do it on the way. You start out knowing nothing. You can use it maybe. There is this joke that in the beginning, once you use Vim, most people don't know how to leave it. There you see. So you start learning the commands that make and the important part there is your editing more effective. Because this is specific to what you edit. Editing a text file is different from source code. If you write prose is different. So it really depends. And also different programming languages might have different requirements. It's really specific to your application and also to you, because what is optimal for you might not be the best choice for someone else. And so you do this on the way. And in order that this works, you must be willing to constantly kind of improve. And also what is possible, what is important, and this is also an issue for me, I have to say, is you really have to think. So if you don't like thinking while editing, then Vim is probably not the best choice. The steps are, while you're editing, you have to analyze how much time or keystrokes, the measure is keystrokes, you spend on certain actions. And if you do repeatedly do stuff where you think, okay, this really requires a lot of things to do, then you want to investigate and search if there is possibly something in Vim that can do this quicker. And you will see this applies especially for things that you do repeatedly. So Vim is very, very good in optimizing things you do repeatedly. Then when you learn this, then you have to train using these commands until it becomes a habit. Why is this important? Well, you can have fancy things, but when you have to think about it, let's say you break down something to 3 keystrokes, but in order to do those 3 keystrokes, you have to think about it 30 seconds. Yeah, that doesn't make much sense. So it really must become a habit, and it really must be in the flow. Yeah, and there you also see that this is something that evolves over time. For example, me at the moment, I'm not at the height of my Vim mastery. Yeah? This is only the case if you really program all day and don't do anything else. Then you have a much larger arsenal of things you can do. Now, if you are like me and you edit text files from time to time, then you don't have enough training to remember all those fancy things. Yeah? So at the moment, you could say, vocabulary in Vim is smaller. It's still good, but it's smaller because I don't practice enough. Yeah, and you may know, use it or lose it. Yeah, this also applies here. I mean, there are people, they learn something, they know it all of their life. I'm not one of those. So yeah, it's a constant process. Having said that, don't overdo it. Yeah, with a lot of things, you still want to do some work. Yeah, so this is just a tool. Yeah, and at some point you must stop. Yeah? Because you will see there is often no optimal solution. There is a good enough solution, and what's good enough, that depends on you. There are some perfectionists that really want to get it to the best thing, and others, well, they do maybe have 10, 20 commands, and they already feel empowered and feel like they achieve something. So, and both is fine. Yeah? So this really depends on you. To learn and to find out what things can be done, of course, you can search the internet, but I would recommend you use the excellent built-in documentation. You will see in the demo how to access it. It's text-based documentation. It's an excellent, really complete documentation built into the editor. So now, before the demo, most of this talk will be a demo, some preliminary, I don't know this word, info for the demo. I use my personal, and there's already a typo, my personal configuration. And this is because I think I want to make a point why it makes sense to adapt this to your needs. And therefore, I want to show you my configuration. This, as a consequence, sometimes there are things that will not work in your configuration. I will mark those things. Those are not very common. Yeah, so most things are also work in standard Vim, but there are some cases where they will not work in standard Vim. I still want to show you what my setting is, just to make the point where you should go. Yeah, this doesn't mean you should mimic or copy my setting, but you should find your best configuration that suits your needs, because you probably have a completely other use for a text editor than I do. So some specific adaptations in my configuration that are important for you to understand. So I remapped the leader key. So most commands have a leader key to space. Why space? Because I need this key all the time. And so I map it to the largest key available on the keyboard. Yeah. My thumb is always on space. So this is a good idea. Yeah? Of course, you have to get used to it, but once you do, you don't look back. Yeah. Then for scrolling through a page, I map tab to Control D. This is the command in Vim to scroll down half a page. In source code, I prefer to not scroll page-wise because you lose the context. When you do whole pages, you lose yourself. Yeah? And so I find it more comfortable to scroll through source code half page wise. And so tab scrolls down half a page and shift tab scrolls up half a page. Then there are some remappings. You might know quick fix windows, and there are also location list windows. They are similar. Those are windows in Vim that are open, that are not directly editing windows, that are open, for example, when you build something to list the errors, yeah? Or when you grab something to list the matches. Yeah? And closing those quick fix windows, I cannot remember those shortcuts, yeah? And so I create a mapping that just closes all open quick fix location list windows with leader A. And to close the current buffer, I mapped it to leader 2. So I'm not very good in remembering shortcuts. Therefore, you will see in my configuration, a lot of things are there to make things simpler and especially easier to remember for me. Now, having said that, really the power of Vim, and you saw that with this screwdriver in the comic, the power comes from adapting it to you and your requirements. Yeah, so you really should configure it to your needs. And so at the end, make Vim your tool. If you are not willing to do that, you can use it, but then probably other editors out of the box will provide you a better experience, yeah, and maybe also more effective editing. In this demo, I already told you that how you do things and what you can do depends also what type of file you're editing, yeah, because different files have different structure and different requirements for an editor. This demo is targeted at editing source code. So when you're editing text files or writing prose, markdown documents, whatever, then there might be other things that are important. Yeah. So, but here I limit myself to editing source code. So now, let's see how this works. I have this keystroke thingy. I hope this works. So let us try this out. And please tell me if you see that. Can you see that? Is it too small? So can you see the overlay with the characters?
Yes, it's perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, very good. So let's start out. So the first thing. By the way, I do this here in a terminal window, and that's another, I think, great thing in Vim is that essentially the terminal window just looks, at least in my configuration, exactly the same as, I cannot move this away, as the GUI editor. Yeah? So it really looks, you cannot distinguish it, yeah, from each other. So the first thing I want to show you is what I call the Vim way. Yeah. So you already we already talked about making repetitions, optimizing repetitions, and Vim is really very, very good in cutting down repetitions. So save you from repetitive entries. And to make this work, it's important that you make actions and movements repeatable. So there are always a lot of ways to do things, but it's important to make stuff repeatable so to do things in a way so that it's repeatable in different contexts. So wait a moment, I have to go. So the first thing I want to do is here, this is a C source code. And for some reason, I have forgotten the semicolon here. And you already see here, there is this mark column. And you see two marks. The first one indicates that I changed the code. Oh, the text is changed in comparison to the version that's checked in Git. Yeah, so this is the first thing. This is enabled by a plugin, but it's not so important. But important is this cross. This tells you, this is the linter, this is ale. And here you can see it gives you direct feedback that something is wrong here. And usually it also tells you what is wrong. Yeah. So when you make a mistake, that you instantly see that something is wrong. So now what we want to do is we want to add this we want to add the semicolon at the end. And one way to do is, well, we could just, this is probably what the beginner would do. He would go there with arrow keys. My arrow keys don't work here. Then he would do the add, and then he would enter it. Yeah, that's it. This is not repeatable, yeah, because it depends on how often I do this movement. So the one way to do is, first of all, there is the dot command. The dot command, you could say, is a micro macro. It will repeat the last action. And this means only the last action. This means a single action before. And in terms to use it, it must be a single action. Let's say you are already experienced. You might say, okay, I move to the end of the line. This is the $sign. Unfortunately, this key thing doesn't get this. And then I do add and add the semicolon. But now when I go down here, you will see this doesn't work because the dot command only operates on the last command I did. And this was the add. And now comes in Vim, there are now a lot of so-called compound commands. And the compound command we want to use here, and this is a command I use very often, is capital A. And capital A, what it does is it moves to the end of the line, so $, and then enters append insert mode. So there we go. And now we enter the colon, we can go down, and now this action is repeatable. Yeah, so when I press now the dot, I get it, yeah, on every line. And this is what we want to achieve. So this is a very good example of using this dot command. The optimal case always is you want to do one keystroke for the move and one keystroke to execute the editing of the file. Yeah? This is where you want to get. Yeah? This is not always achievable, but this is what you want to achieve. Now, another example is, and I explain the movements later on to you, but I just do it now. Here we have source code. And you see there are operators in here. And what I want here, I'm a formatting fanatic. I want to have spaces around those operators. And again, the Vim way to do it, when you move in files, you usually want to scan. You want to search, or you want to jump to a certain location. And to go to a location or to scan to a location within one line, there is the F command. So F, and then the star. And then important now, of course, now I could do insert space and do this, yeah, to add the spaces, but this wouldn't be repeatable. I can repeat the last move, yeah, with semicolon to the next star, but now when I press dot, it doesn't work, yeah, because it only remembers the last movement. So again, what I need here is a compound movement. So let's do this again. So I do F to the star, and now I use S, delete character under cursor, and enter insert mode. S, then I do the editing, escape, and now I can scan forward, and now this is repeatable. Yeah. And to go to the next location, for example, down here. And this is now what I mentioned, this easy motion thing. I have a shortcut, and it will search for 2 characters on all of the visible screen, because for example, I have different possibilities now. When I cancel this, to go down here. Of course, I could go here and then maybe go back. I also, of course, could just jump to the line. This is also quite quick here, or I could use this easy motion command, entering the first two characters. Like in this case, I could go to VO, and then he will mark WO. He will mark all occasions where this is where these two characters are, and I can then jump directly there by entering this single character. Yeah, that's it. And now I can repeat this. So this is still possible to repeat this. I do again to the scan, and I also can apply the changes here just by repeatedly pressing repeat last movement, repeat last action. And this is where you want to get. That's the magic. You do the editing one time, and then when you repeatedly do stuff, you just do this by repeating the last action using the dot command. Sometimes it is necessary, what I call to step back one, to go back one step to enable that the command is repeatable. This might have been easier to do it differently, but then it might not be repeatable. There was a question. Okay, sorry. Okay, that was that. Then the next thing I want to show you is another example. Now here we have a text file, and one thing you often want to do is just to change all occurrences of a certain word, for example. Now, of course, you could do this with a search and substitute. You could do it with SED, but the problem there is that they have no feedback. Sometimes it's not that straightforward, and it might be necessary to review every single change. And so what you can do in Vim is there is the star command, search forward for word on the cursor. And this will then, in my configuration, when you do Vim Sensible, this will also be true, mark all matches for the search. Then you do the change word, like let's change it to site. And now you can repeat this. N is the next match. And then again, dot, do the change. And here you can see, well, there it doesn't fit. So either you change it later or now, but for now we skip it because that would be a mistake now to change it. Until we have all, and then at the end, we will cycle back to the beginning where we started. That's it. This habit or this way to do things sometimes causes to this repetitive, quick move, repeat sequences. Yeah, for example, n dot, or this semicolon dot. And sometimes you might get into a situation where you do something that you didn't want to do, like here. And so in any situation where you do repetition, where you repeat things, Vim has some easy way to go back. And in case of this change, this is the U, well, for undo. So you can just by pressing U undo the previous change. So even if you made a mistake, it's very simple to go back. And then when you want to redo it, like here, we say, okay, that was correct. Then Control R will redo the last change. Yeah. Okay. Then the next thing I wanted to show you, the dot command is great, very versatile, and you can apply it in a lot of situations. Sometimes it takes some tweaking because it only can repeat the last action. And so now there is another feature, and I call this from great to awesome. Vim allows you to record on the fly macros, arbitrary sequences of editing you're doing. And this is really a very, very powerful feature. I only have a very small example. I hope this illustrates you how good this is. It takes some practice. because when you really want to apply complicated stuff, and you can play back, so what happens is you enter commands, those commands will be recorded, and you store those commands to a so-called register. Registers are things or places where you can store paste buffers and also macros. And then you can play back those macros, and it will really, as if you would press those keys again. And well, what happens then depends on the text is in. So what you have to do is you have to enter the commands in a way that they are repeatable on different variants of text. Like here in this occasion, what I want to do here is I want to change the MD float to double, and I want to enclose the right-hand side with braces, so with brackets. Yeah. And how you would do it? You press QA. This starts recording a macro and store the macro to a register. In this case, register A. And then you just do whatever is necessary to edit this stuff. And of course, you have to be careful that it is in a way that it also works on the other lines. This takes some practice. And sometimes you make mistakes. The good thing, when you make a mistake, the macro will stop. And as you have learned, you can quickly go back. So let's change word this to double. Then what we want to do is we want to add brackets. To do this, I go forward to the equal sign, and this should always work. This is my auto pairs thing. In this case, this hurts because I don't need it. So what I do is I remove the one bracket. I go to the end of the file. And for the macros, honestly, here I don't strive for minimal number of keystrokes, because the main save here is for repeating the macro. So I use more commands, but in a way where I can be sure that this also works on other instances of the file. Yeah, because, for example, here, this movement going to the end of the line, this is something very robust. This will work on any other file. Then I go back and add the closing braces. To make this repeatable without a movement, I place the cursor to the same position. Yeah, so that the macro will work from the beginning. This is called normalizing the cursor position. With Q now, I stop recording. And now if we are lucky and I did no mistake, with add A, I can play back the macro, which I just recorded. Yeah, and worked, yeah, on different text. Add is just a shortcut to play back the last executed macro, so I can do it again. Now, what I also can do now is, of course, I can prepend a number to this. For example, I could do all three at once. Yeah? Of course, now when I undo, all three occasions will be undone, yeah, because this was a single action. Yeah, I hope this illustrates how powerful this is. Yeah? When I do this on a line where it doesn't work, it will just stop execution. By the way, I think here, yeah, it worked. Okay, here it worked. Maybe I did it different than from the practice before, because the way I did it last time, it didn't work. Yeah. What I do is, to make this quicker, as I mentioned, I'm very bad at remembering stuff. I remap this add Q to capital Q. And this allows me to really do QQ. Then I do the change. Oh, okay, let's stop this. And I can play back the change then with the capital Q instead of the add Q. Yeah, so add register. It's only a small thing, but this is easy to memorize. QQQ capital Q. Yeah, so this sequence. So this thing can really be used on very powerful things. For example, one application would be if you want to change your header, and this is a very static text. For example, change the year, the name, and a lot of other things maybe. This can be then really done with a single keystroke in a single macro. Yeah? And it's a very powerful way to do it. There are a lot of details about this macro, so I really suggest to look in the documentation if you want to learn more. Yeah? But already in this way, it is really useful. So next is getting around within a file. And to illustrate this, I have the liquid source code. And again, this is specific now for source code. First of all, one thing, Vim is designed that you keep your hands on the home row. So what is the home row? The home row is where these marks are when you do touch typing. Yeah, and the movement arrows or the keys for movement are H, J, K, L. You might have heard this. At the beginning, this is really difficult to memorize. And me, myself, I also, when I started out using Vim, I always did everything with the arrow keys. But I really suggest force yourself to learn and memorize those H, J, K, L keys. It makes your editing really much faster because you don't have your move your hand constantly between the arrow keys and the main keyboard. The other thing is, of course, you can move around by just using the single character movements, but this is not very effective. So remember, Vim comes from a time where you didn't have a screen, and therefore navigating could only be done by searches and direct jumps. And so this is still the most effective way to move around in text in Vim. So some commands, these are just some commands I frequently use. Of course, there are dozens, maybe hundreds more. Yeah? So GG, go to the start of the file. Capital G, go to the end of the file. Then to navigate when I want to scroll through something, I have this half page down mapped to tab. Yeah? So the default key binding is Control D. And this is when I just want to look around. Yeah? Another quite effective way to go to a certain location is to directly jump to a line. Or let's do first. You see now my cursor is now here at the start. When you want to edit, usually you want to see the whole context. And a shortcut to move the cursor, the position of the cursor in the middle of the screen is ZZ. So ZZ, you will move this line to the middle of the screen so that you have the nice context around, and this is usually what you want to do editing. The next is you can jump directly to a line, yeah? And this is also quite useful, like here, when you say, I want to go here to this else if, you just enter a line and capital G, and you jump to the line. Of course, you could also search for something, like here, processor ID, we could enter processor ID. But here you already see this is not very useful because there are so many instances of it. Yeah? But sometimes this is useful. Yeah. And now we come to source code specific stuff. Square brackets allow you to jump to the next. This is the closing, and previous, this is the opening start of a function block. Like, wait a moment. Oh, I'm in the wrong window. Now I was confused. And actually it was wrong. You need, no, wait a moment. You need double, yeah, double the bracket. So this is wrong. I have to correct this for the final slide. So you need to add double. So for example, when you're in a file, you want to go to the first function, you just press double, closing brackets, and then you go to the start of the function unit. Another quite useful thing is for when you have a C syntax is to use percentage to go to the closing brackets. Here, this is maybe not that interesting, but sometimes when you have really large function blocks, to be able to jump to the end of a function to a block is really useful. Finally, within a file, what I recommend is using a text browser. There is a tool called ctags. There are different versions of it, and this indexes the code and marks where the definitions are. And there are plugins that allow you to see an overview about the structure of the current file. I mapped this to Control T, but of course there's also a command for it. And what I use is tag bar. Now, of course, you can use any other. Oh, sorry. Of course, you can use any other plugin that enables this functionality. And now you can really directly jump. In the GUI version, you can double click, but here you could search or just press enter to jump to this function. And also you see at a single glance the structure, so what functions are in there. Yeah. Again, this is not specific to Vim, but still something you shouldn't miss out. And finally, there is this Easy Motion plugin. I have to admit, I don't use it too often. Maybe because I'm lazy, I don't know. So for example, let's say you are here, this own a toy, and you want to go there. Then you press S, and then you press OW, and then it will mark all occurrences of that, and then you can directly jump to this location. This is when there is only one occurrence, it will directly jump to it. Yeah? So it's quite useful for random jumps. Now, within a project, when you want to get around within a project, now Liquid, as you might know, has a lot of files. And again, here, don't do this by hand. Yeah? Use tools to jump around. When you have tags, and there is this text command, what you can do is, this is built in Vim functionality. You could use control closing square brackets to jump to the definition of a symbol. So let me do that. So for example, here bstring list, your cursor is on this symbol, and you can just press closing square brackets to jump to the definition. To go back, you can use Control O. This is for any jump. Yeah? Control O always brings you back in the history from your jumps. Now I want to introduce FZF for you. Yeah, and those are the important mappings. Of course, there are a lot more. One thing I wanted to show you is the documentation. Documentation is open with :H and then just a search term like tags. And when you find something, he will directly bring you here until here the window is a bit narrow, but yeah, it's just a text file. And as you can see already about text, there is a lot of things you can read and learn. Usually you don't need it. So for most people, what they want is this control closing square brackets. Yeah. Now for FZF, so for this fuzzy finder, when you have a new project, and I also use this in projects I know, usually, first of all, to find around, and also, even if you know the file, I don't want to click around in a file browser. I want to directly open the file, even if it's a deep directory tree. And there is this leader E shortcut. This will open the fuzzy finder. As you can see, the list is already finished. It's 1,730 files. And fuzzy find, the nice thing about fuzzy find is I could enter perf, and here I already have the C, or I could say, okay, I want to have all C files. There we go. I could search for an architecture, I don't know, Haswell, and you will find all files that match in the path for Haswell. And when I have one, let's again search for perf mon. Then I press enter, and I'm inside the file. So this is quite powerful. The same interface is available also for open buffers. So when you open a file, any open file you can have, you can open an arbitrary number of files in Liquid, not in Liquid, in Vim. but to open different buffers, I use the same interface. So the shortcut is leader B, and those are the buffers I currently have open, and then I can just open another file, another buffer. Another thing I frequently use is this ripgrab command. So this is an external command, and to enable this, I do this G again, and let's search for Ice Lake, and this will now open a location list, yeah, with all matches of Ice Lake, yeah, and then I can scroll around there and open the one I want to know, yeah, like this one. Now I have this location list, and sometimes people are afraid to close this list because there are different commands to close different lists. And therefore, now comes this handy command with leader A to close all location and quick fix lists. Finally, there are more, but I only want to show you those here, is leader capital T lets you search the tags. Yeah, like for example, let's do B string, and there you see all matches, all definitions of B string, for example. And one final thing I want to show you there is this is also available for the help tags of Vim. So let's, what should be window? There you see all occurrences where you have in help texts with those tags, like here the window documentation of Vim. Okay. So managing your screen, Vim has windows. So this is a window, and you can have multiple windows open in one, yeah, I would call it screen. Yeah. Vim also has support for tabs. Every tab can hold multiple windows, but I have to admit, I do not use tabs. It's a personal thing. So if you like this, it's there, but I don't use it. What I use frequently is split screens. Yeah. And there are two split commands. You can split with just split. This makes a horizontal split. And then, for example, you could open the same file like here, or you could open a different file. And also what you can do is open a vertical split with resplit, and then this will be split again. I mapped control and the movement keys to easily cycle around with simple keystrokes between the splits. This is really something I use a lot, but it's a personal preference. So some people hate it. To close all splits and all windows, you can use this only command. Yeah, then only the window where your cursor is in will be there. Yeah. Again, this is a personal preference. Some like it like tabs, some like it only view one window. And I mean, if you have like this, you can quickly jump between buffers. It's really easy. Yeah. So it's really up to you. Wait a moment. I wanted to show something. One thing for a plugin, for example, where you can see my personal preference, as I said, I'm a formatting fanatic. Yeah? And you might think, okay, what is this at the end? This is a trailing white space. So this is a white space at the end of the source line. This is there because in Thomas' editor, probably this is not marked. You don't see it because it's a damn white space. But I hate this. And therefore, I have a plugin that colors trailing white spaces. And when I save, it will remove all those. Yeah. Okay, but let's leave it in. Right. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show there. Finally, don't be religious about this whole thing. There are cases where copy and paste with mouse is a fast acceptable option. Yeah? Like, for example, when you look at this code here and you don't know, you want to arbitrarily copy stuff around here, then it's a good way to do it with mouse and control copy X V. So I would say the Windows way of editing. Yeah, this is sometimes not possible in the terminal. It's always possible. Let me open it in the GUI version of the editor. Like here's the same file. You can just mark, remove it, place the cursor someone, edit it. I have to admit that it's not optimal because sometimes you still have to change modes. So this doesn't play too well with the modes, but it's possible. And you shouldn't, when this is the best way to do something, you should do it. Yeah. Another thing I want to mention is there is nowadays a very popular editor is VS Code. And this offers a Vim editing mode. So you can use VS Code with a Vim interface. Yeah. And I think this is also a good choice, yeah, because, well, VS Code out of the box probably already gives you a lot of things, and most industrial or vendors or projects will offer very good support or out-of-the-house support for VS Code. And, well, if you already use VS Code, you could just turn on the Vim editing mode to profit from those features, from those powerful features of modal editing. I don't know that well how well it works, so probably not all features work, but I guess the basic stuff works. So that's it. That's the end of this talk. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned what you have to do to make this a powerful editor, and it is a powerful editor. Me myself, well, of course, when I'm tired or I also do this from time to time, yeah, because, well, I can, yeah. That's up to you, yeah, how you use it, yeah. I know it's not perfect, but you have to be comfortable, yeah, with this tool and how you use it. Yeah. There are, of course, a lot of really awesome features I did not talk about, yeah. Like visual mode, visual block mode. I don't go into detail now, yeah. Just keywords. I suggest if you're a Vim user and you do not know those things, look it up. Yeah, so those are really very, useful things. Yeah, I hope this was useful to you. Have a nice afternoon.